Hey there, welcome to the channel. My name is Greg. Today I'm going to show you how I made this Basturma. Basturma is an Armenian cured beef. It's got some warming spices, it's got a little bit of heat. Frankly, the first time I had it, I thought it was one of the best things ever. Let's get into making some Basturma. Usually, Basturma would be made from an eye of round. I've heard of people using the fillet, but that just seems like a not great use of the fillet. If I was going out to buy this, I would have bought an eye round. I get a side of beef for my freezer once a year, and I've already used my eye of round for bresaola. So what I have here is a piece of top round. Say top round, bottom round, decent substitutes for the eye round. It's all pretty lean, and that's the main thing. You don't want too much intramuscular fat, just like with jerky, it can kind of cause a chewy texture that we're not really going for. So I'm just cutting off the silver skin, any excess fat that may be on this. I'm going to cut off the skinny area. I'll save that for sausage. This other stuff's just for the dogs. Over here too, it's a little thin. Just try to keep it kind of a uniform size. So got that trimmed up. I'm just going to pat it dry real quick. My next step is going to be to get a weight on this. Now that I have a weight, I can make up my spice mix for my equilibrium cure. Moving along to the spice mix and cure, I'm going to start out with some coriander and some black pepper. And the reason I weighed those up first is so I can put them in a pan, start them toasting while I weigh up the rest. And now that those are toasting over some low heat, I'm going to weigh up my salt. And I'm going to use some cure number 2. I'm using cure number 2 because this will take a little over a month. And over 30 days I use cure 2. Under 30 days I use cure number 1 because cure number 2 has sodium nitrate that very slowly converts to nitrite. It's the nitrite that actually interacts with the proteins to convert to nitric oxide. I'm going to go in with some cumin, and I'm also going to add some sugar. I'm using brown sugar. I think the extra little molassesy taste will be a good addition, but plain sugar is fine too. You know, you do you. So my pepper and coriander are just starting to smell a little fragrant. I'm going to add them back in. And the only other ingredient going in at this time is I've minced up a little bit of garlic, and I'll add that as well. So let's move to the next step. So before I mix in my spices, I'm going to show you, I measured this fattest part. This is about 3 inches. So I looked on my brining time calculator, which I'll put a link in there for. And I see this is going to go for just under 2 weeks. I'll probably leave it for 2 weeks because the beauty of this equilibrium cure is you really can't go too long. It's not going to pick up any more salt than what I'm putting in. Now, the old-fashioned way of doing this is called a salt box method. In that method, you would just encase this whole thing in your salt and spices, and then you'd have to pull it out based on the thickness of your meat. If you don't pull it out in time, it will become extra salty, and if you pull it out too early, you won't get a good cure. Which is the same with this. If you pull this out too early, you won't get an adequate core cure through the middle, and your meat could spoil. But you really can't go too long with this method because I've weighed my meat, I've weighed my spices. It can't absorb more than what I'm putting in. But the important thing is that I get it all to stick, and what does not stick, I need to make sure to put in my bag while it's curing. So I'll have that pretty well covered on all sides. And I've got my freezer bag, my seal meal bag, cut. I like to fold over the top so that I can try to not get the cure on it because it can affect getting a good seal. You can do this in a Ziploc bag, although expect it to leak. It's better in a sealable bag if you have it. Like I was saying before, the important thing when doing this equilibrium cure is to get every bit of this cure into this bag. This is 3 inches in the thickest part. It says 11.2 days. It also says to add 20%, so that's another 2 days. It's like 13 days. I'm just going to call it 2 weeks. So I'm going to label it, put my date on it, and then put my date that it comes out. And there you go. Now, in effect, it's kind of all you need. However, Basturma has a certain look to it. That's because it's pressed. It's flattened. What I'm going to do is put some weights on top. Try to get that to flatten out just a little bit. But you could use a container of water, whatever you have to add some weight. That's how you're going to get the traditional look. So I'm going to put this in my refrigerator. I'm going to take it out in 2 weeks. I'll see you in a while. Well, here's my Basturma. It actually went about a week longer than it needed to, but that's the beauty of the equilibrium cure. It won't absorb any more salt than what's actually in there. You can see quite a lot of liquid has been forced out of this meat. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go take this to the sink and I'm going to rinse it off, pat it dry with some paper towels. Then I'll put it on one of these collagen sheets. I got these from the butcher's pantry and they're just simply a sheet of collagen. I like to get it ready before I wash off that meat. So as soon as I wash it off and pat it dry, plop it right down. All right, after rinsing it off, patted it dry. Want to leave a little moisture on here because I do want it to have enough moisture for this sheet to stick to it. So just try to get it as tight as I easily can. No big deal there. And then I like to just take a little bit of water on my fingertips, just kind of wet this collagen sheet. And I find it helps it to stick to the other side there. Easy as that. Now I want to make sure I have enough to cover this edge, but I don't need a whole lot extra. So what I'm going to do, cut that. And this I can use for another piece. That's plenty for like something small, or sometimes you find yourself needing a little patch. It's handy to have little pieces like that around. Really, it's pretty much as simple as that. And I'm going to take some netting. Gonna twist that up and just tie this right here. Put a second knot on to hold that tight. And tie that together to make a loop so I can hang it. Same thing on the other side. Just twist it up. One more thing I want to do here is just weigh that up. I'm going to make a tag. I want to dry this 25% of its weight now. So 1296 times 75%. I'm going to dry it till it hits 972 grams. And I'll be doing that in my curing chamber, which I will show you in a minute, as soon as I make a tag for this. One other thing that I did before putting it into my drying chamber is I took my little sausage pricker, sterilized it, and I poked some holes in that collagen sheet on all sides. You don't need a sausage pricker. You could use a pin or a needle, anything sharp. It's going to just make a small hole. Just make sure it's clean and sterile. Pretty important step. For whatever reason, I don't have footage of it. I'm not sure if I didn't turn my camera on or if I erased that file accidentally. Let's go check out the cabinet. So I got this hanging in my chamber now. This stays about 55 degrees Fahrenheit and about 80% humidity. Leave this in here for, I'm guessing, about a couple weeks. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, but until it loses 25% of its weight. Found that beef dries quite a bit quicker than pork, especially the lean stuff. See you in a bit. My beef is dried. It's about 25. It's actually more like 28%. See, it still has some give on it. Before I unwrap this, I'm going to start making my spice coating. It's called Chaman, spelled C-H-A-M-A-N, but it's pronounced more like a U. And this is heavy in the fenugreek. Fenugreek is like the base. I always like to toast my seeds and spices when I can. So there's my fenugreek. I'm going to go even a little more. Not really measuring there. And I'm just going to go a pinch or so of cumin and a pretty good amount of black peppercorns. So I'm going to go get these on the heat. It's on some low to medium, just till I start smelling them and oils start coming out a little. The other thing that's pretty heavy in this is the paprika. Put in some paprika. I'm just gonna add a tiny bit of garlic powder. My chili paste that I will be using coming up is actually a harissa, very spicy chili paste, but it has a lot of garlic in it already. You know it's gonna need some salt, but I will adjust my salt later after I mix everything together. Oh, I'm smelling those spices. I'm gonna go grind them real quick. Add those spices that I just ground. And I just love the smell of, didn't really grind it as thin as I'd like. Try that again. I love the smell of fenugreek. Fenugreek kind of reminds me of like butterscotch. I'm also gonna add just a tiny bit of cardamom because that's gonna go really good with all this too. Pretty popular spice in Armenian cuisine. You can kind of really make it your own, do what you want, as long as it's, got a very predominant fenugreek, and obviously it needs some spice. Because my harissa I'll be using is pretty spicy, I'm not adding any extra cayenne or anything, but depending on your chili paste, you might want to add some cayenne, kind of up to you. Now, before I start adding my wet ingredients, I'm going to get my meat ready, because once I add the water, chili paste and stuff, it can start to thicken up. And I want to spread it while it's thin. So let me get my meat ready. Just gotta take off this netting. You can see it has some white mold. Did not put any of that white mold on, but my chamber just has so much of it in there. It tends to grow. I'm hoping it won't grow much onto my finished Basturma, the coating, but we'll find out. Now, if your collagen sticks, it doesn't come off that easy, you can always just dampen it just a little bit. Not a big deal. A little bit of water, loosen it right up. Okay, well, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wash some of this mold off. The way I'll wash the mold off is I'll just put this in a little pan, kind of rinse it with some red wine. Could also use white wine or vinegar, anything acidic like that. I suppose you could use lemon juice, but I haven't tried that, so I don't know. I'm sure it would kill the mold, but I'm not sure what it would do to the meat. So you can see, it comes off real easy. Just give it a quick little rinse. And just pat that dry. Dry that off with the paper towel most of the way. Now we're golden. You can see it's flexible, squishy. It's starting to dry. It's not quite perfect, not quite there yet, but very close. If you have a butcher's needle, this would be a great time to bust it out. I don't have one, so I'm just going to you can use any kind of skewer. I'm just going to use this candy thermometer because it has a nice point on it, and I'm pretty sure it'll punch a hole in here real good. Yep, perfect. Wiggle it around to make my hole a little bigger. I'll see if I can't push my string through. Can be a little finicky without a butcher's needle, but you can get it done. There we go, right through the other side. Not too bad. Tie a knot so we'll have a loop to hang it from. Okay, now we're ready. So now I'm going to finish up my spice mix, and then we'll bring that back. So this is harissa. I'm using this. This has a lot of garlic. It has cumin already. It has a lot of the flavors that I want to have in this spice coating. So, but you could use any chili paste. Just might want to adjust your garlic. This is really spicy. I think that'll be good. I'm just going to add a little bit of water at a time. Slowly hydrate these spices and make more of a paste out of this whole thing. If the paste is too dry, it will be hard to get a thin layer. You want a really thin layer. Too thick of a layer, it can slow down the meat from drying, and it can also crack. We don't really want either of those things to happen. Now at this point, we just want to give it a little taste so I can adjust for salt if I need to. It does need a little bit more salt. Honestly, I think just a teeny bit of sugar is going to be good too. Well, that's not my original recipe. I think it'll be really good. She didn't have those little pieces of fenugreek that weren't ground. I wish I'd ground them all better. But it'll be all right. Yep, perfect. I think that little bit of sugar was perfect. I think that was a really good idea. Whew, that's got a kick to it. Okay, next. Just gonna put down a tiny bit of water on the bottom. Not much, just a little bit. And I'm gonna put a little bit of this down. And I'm just gonna try to spread a pretty thin layer of this on top. And on the sides, and all around. You know, it looks to me like I might have made just the perfect amount. Looking pretty good. One little bald spot. Don't want any bald spots. Now I'm just going to take a little bit of water on my hand and just kind of smooth this out. And that'll help me even out any parts that seem either too thick or too thin. I have another version that's not really traditional, different kind of set of spices, which I think is even better than this original one. There we go. I'm going to go hang this up in my chamber where I'm going to leave it for a week or two. It's really going to depend on how this coating looks. You want the coating to dry out, but not crack or anything. If you want to have some moisture, that's how I'm going to judge when it's ready. It's been drying for another 12 days. The crust is, coating is dried, but it's not so dry it's going to crack. It's a little crumbly. I should have really ground it to a finer texture. Look close. You can see it has these little pieces of fenugreek in it. Probably would have been better if I ground it all the way to a powder. Well, let's pull out this string. This coating is super spicy. Let's get a look at the inside. Smells just rich, deep and rich, and that spicy coating on it. Let's give it a slice on the slicer. See how translucent that is? See my finger? Yeah, you can see my finger moving behind that. That's pretty translucent there. Let's sit down and give this a taste here. See if it's as good as the Basturma I had when I worked at Alvin's Coffees and Teas. I spent a couple of years living in San Francisco when I was a teenager. I worked at this coffee shop called Alvin's Coffees and Teas. It was owned by this Armenian couple, Alvin and his wife, Helen. Along with importing coffee beans and roasting it himself, he also imported a lot of specialty items. And one of the things he got was Basturma. Of course, the Basturma he got was not imported. It was made locally, but it was definitely a specialty item. People bought it as a treat. It was definitely pretty expensive. My guess is it was probably made from a filet mignon, not from the round. But the first time I had it, it was like nothing I'd ever had. Once I got into curing meats myself, I knew I wanted to try to make Basturma. And I've made it several times now, kind of dialing it in just a little bit. Honestly, it's been a long time since I worked at Alvin's Coffees and Teas. Can't really remember. I just remember really liking it. This is really good. Coating is on the outside good. Yeah, that is just delicious. What I'm going to do with these is I'm going to vacuum seal them up, equalize them for about a month. That'll help this little drier area on the outside equalize to the inside. I like to equalize my charcuterie when possible. That just means vacuum sealing it and leaving it in the refrigerator for the same amount of time as it took to dry. I like to at least equalize things for half the amount they were drying, but it's best if you can leave it as long as it took to dry. So like I said, this took 1 month to dry. I'm going to equalize it for 1 month in my refrigerator. This is I love Basturma. I've made what I call my African spice Basturma. It's the exact same process. But the spices are a bunch of African spices that a friend of mine brought me a while back. And I think I want to make another one of those pretty soon. I'd like to make that African Basturma with some yak meat if I could get my hands on some. I know I have a neighbor here who raises yaks. Let's see if I can get my hand on some yak to cure. Well, another great use for an eye of round, or really any part of the round. Round is really a beefy flavored cut, but not a super exciting one. It's not going to make great steaks. It's not even going to make great pot roasts. Makes good roast beef though, for like an Italian beef sandwich, Chicago style. I'd like to make one of those pretty soon. All about finding ways to use every cut. And to me, this Basturma, it makes the cut. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps the algorithm share it more widely. If you're still watching at this point, make sure you're subscribed to my channel because you'd probably like some of my other content. Put some love into the food you're making. Peace.